Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the appropriate time, I have an amendment.
Now's the appropriate time.
Thank you. I'd like to move passage of LC 811/2.
Leader Newberry moves passage of Amendment LC 00811/2, seconded by Representative Costa, Representative Chippendales. Moved and seconded. Explanation, please, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask your indulgence for the time because it's difficult to describe the districts in the 5-minute allotment per speaking portion. Ladies and gentlemen, just at the outset, my amendment is, if you try to read the metes and bounds, it's hard to know what's going on, just like with the bill. My amendment affects only 2 districts in the state, District 47 and District 48. I'll get to that in a minute. I want to make it clear it does not affect anybody else's district. It also does not affect the Senate overlay map. The changes that I'm talking about are all contained in the eastern portion of the town of Burrillville. They all fall within Senate District 23, and they affect only 2 voting precincts. The 2 districts that are affected by my amendment, as I said, are House District 47, currently Rep. Keable's district. It's in the northwestern corner of the state. It consists now of approximately 75% of the town of Burrillville and a small slice of Gloucester. The piece of Gloucester is not at issue in my amendment. District 48 is the district that I represent. It consists of the town of North Smithfield and the remaining approximately 25% of the town of Burrillville. Now, historically, I don't mean 100 years ago historically, but in the last few decades, there's always been a district, even before the downsizing, that was a Burrillville district, and then another district next door that was primarily North Smithfield with the remaining piece of Burrillville. And when this district line was drawn, the current line was drawn in 2002, it did not meet with any controversy. In fact, those of you who were here at the time may remember your colleagues Scott Rabideau and Bob Lowe, a Republican and a Democrat from the respective districts. There was no controversy at the time. The reason the district line was drawn back in 2002 through the portion of Burrillville where it's drawn is because it tracks the current village boundaries, more or less, of the town. Like a lot of rural communities, Burrillville is a town of several villages. You may have heard of some of them, the larger ones, Pasco, Harrisville, and so forth. Under the existing boundaries, the villages of Glendale, Nasonville, and Mohegan are principally in District 48. The village of Oakland Mapleville is principally in District 47. Those are the villages along the border. Now, when the census figures came out, Representative Yuchi talked about the ripple effect in the East Bay, and I totally understand that, but we're up in the corner. And there was very little change in the population in the Blackstone Valley and up in the northwest corner of the state. And when the census figures arrived, I looked at District 48, and in order to get within the mean, the 2.5% that the consultant recommended, it was necessary for District 48, which was overpopulated, to lose about 300 to 400 people. District 47 next door was conveniently underpopulated by about the same amount. So logically, if you want to avoid voter disruption, confusion, et cetera, you could find a way simply to move roughly 300 to 400 people from District 48 to 47. Now, that's what I proposed, and that's what my amendment I'm going to ask you to vote on actually does. What happened, though, was during the commission process, and when it got to House Plan C, a new line was completely drawn. It completely changed the line in the eastern portion of Burrillville. Now, let me say this. The demographics of eastern Burrillville on both sides of the existing line and the proposed new line are the same. It's not an urban area. We don't have all the different mixtures of ethnic people. We don't even have political issues. Frankly, if you look at the voting patterns in eastern Burrillville, they tend to, I like this fact, usually vote Republican. So it's not even a political thing where you're moving Democrats or Republicans into one district or another. So I asked during the commission process why this line was being drawn. This was back in December at the commission hearings here at the State House. No one could give an explanation. I will tell you this. A number of people came down from Burrillville to testify against the proposed change, including former Representative Rabideau, a member of the Burrillville Town Council, and several private citizens. They testified against it. Not one person, as we stand here today, not one person that I know of anywhere has publicly spoken up in favor of this change or even given an explanation for why it's being made. So last week at the House Judiciary Committee hearing, I asked Kimball Brace, the consultant, on Tuesday, what's the reason for the change? He didn't give a response. He was asked to look into it by Chairwoman Agello, and he came back on Thursday, and I asked the same question again. What is the reason for this change? The only explanation he could give was that he looked at some fire district maps and tried to conform the boundaries of the new districts to the fire district. Now, Burrillville has a number of private fire districts. I have here the map of the fire districts. I will not bore you by going in intricate detail over the fire district map. I will simply say this. If anyone compares the map that's being proposed for the House districts with this fire district plan, they will find that Mr. Brace's explanation was pure, unadulterated nonsense. I can think of some other choice words I might use, but this is family viewing and I won't use them. So we are left, and then I asked him, do you have any other explanation? He had none. There was no explanation given at any time in any public forum for why this change is being made. Now, why is this change problematic? The new line cuts through the village of Glendale. It cuts through the village of Oakland-Mapleville. It even at one point takes one side of one street off the Mapleville Trailer Park and places it from 47 into 48. That's kind of like going to an urban district, to an apartment building, which is 12 stories high, and saying floors 1 to 11 are going to be in District 47, but floor 12 is going to be in District 48. You would never do that. This particular trailer park is a very nice community. It has a community association. It is the classic definition of community of interest, and this plan before you breaks it up. Again, no explanation as to why. Now, to cut to the chase here, there is a reason why, of course, and the reason is this. In the last election, you remember Representative Pacheco retired and left the seat empty. It's a swing district between Republicans and Democrats. And in the last election, it was a very close race. And the Democratic candidate is here with us today, won by less than 200 votes. And it was a very tough race. I watched it from afar. I didn't get involved, but I represent the other part of town, so I could see what was happening. It got a little bit tough. These things happen. We've all been in these races, or most of us have. And his opponent made no secret about the fact that he was going to run again in 2012. Well, guess what? His opponent lives near the current District 48 boundary. And very conveniently, this change in the legislation before you, which cuts through the village lines, moves his opponent out of District 47 and into District 48. Now,
Leader,
I'm
wrap
sure,
it up. You're beyond your time.
Thank you. I'll be quick. If I can get up again, I think it might
I'm
be easier.
indulgent, but
Thank you, Mr.
get to the point.
To get to the point, I'm sure someone over there is going to jump up and say, you're complaining about politics being involved. No, I'm not. Redistricting is a political process, and I've never complained about that. I don't have trouble with politics being involved. However, I do have a problem with the lack of honesty about what's going on. I'm troubled when a $700,000 taxpayer-funded consultant cannot give an honest answer to the House Judiciary Committee about why this is happening. Frankly, and Mr. Speaker, I credit you on this. Over the years, I've heard you many times explain how you support the committee process. You think it's a good thing, and we encourage people to come to the State House and testify because their voices make a difference. It is obvious, though, that this commission process that we all voted for had no say whatsoever in this change. The whole thing was obviously, as Representative Lima called it, a fraud show. And I object to that. I don't mind if someone's going to make a political change. I mind if someone's going to make a political change and then claim to me it's not a political change or just simply refuse to discuss what's happening. This is not right. This district line is breaking up the natural geographic boundaries. And let me tell you something. I am wrapping it up, Mr. Speaker. There's a federal district court case, ironically enough, our Director of Administration, Richard Leach, 30 years ago, sued and won to have his district gerrymandering overturned on the east side of Providence. And there is precedent in this state. And that precedent says, first you have, when you're adjusting compactness, you must determine whether district lines deviate from natural, historical, geographic, and political lines. Well, this one certainly does. Then it says, second, assuming such a deviation exists, it must be justified by rational and legitimate considerations made in good faith and free from any taint of arbitrariness or discrimination. That's not what's happening here. It's a blatant political gerrymander, and the problem is there's no pretext to cover it. So if you don't vote for my amendment, you are ratifying a false process. You are ratifying a sham that's been played on the voters of the state by having, 21 meetings around the state? They meant nothing. It's not just that people came, testified, and maybe they didn't get what they want. It meant absolutely nothing. It's wrong. It reflects poorly on this body. It reflects poorly on all of us. And for that reason, I ask that you support my amendment and vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Yuchi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in opposition to this amendment. And Leader Newberry put forth an eloquent argument, multifaceted. One argument is you cut out the guy who almost won. The other argument is you cut 3 villages and a trailer park. So that means either someone lives in 3 villages and a trailer park. So he's saying that the entire cut, the entire thing was designed this way. As I said before, half of the Republican caucus has 0%, 5% or less deviation in their district. As we went through this process, when I first took this process on, I literally said, how hard can this be? How hard can it really be? The population didn't come up this much. And then you sit and you listen and you see the ripple effect. Streets get divided, neighborhoods get divided. In every one of your district, someone's been cut out. Someone in here has lost supporters in their district. We're not supposed to look at that. People have had their former opponents not in their district. They've had people who ran before put back into their district. That's what happens in this process. There are not 75 happy people in this room. I know that. I've heard from most of you. I've heard most of you say, why did this happen? Why wasn't this here? It's an imperfect process, just like all of the legislation we pass is. It can't be perfect because there are 75 of us with input. 300 people testified over 20 hearings in 2 nights in the Judiciary Committee. So while I understand this is frustrating, I just want to remind you that District 47 was under 304 votes. District 48 was over 680. There had to be a play in between there to move the votes back and forth. If you look at the other surrounding districts, Woonsocket all had to change going east, into Lincoln, into Cumberland, all of that had to change because of the ripple effect, because you're dealing with the corners of the state. I can't move Burrillville west or north because they're in Connecticut and Mass, and I can't move Cumberland north or east because it'll end up in Massachusetts. Those are the limitations we had. I understand some people are frustrated, but all in all, this is a good bill. This amendment should be defeated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Leader Newberry.
Representative Yuchi, I know it's a tough job coming up with a coherent argument against what I said, but that was pretty good. Salute. Let's cut to the chase. This isn't about the other 73 districts, okay? The reality is this. My amendment moves 332 people in one defined neighborhood from 48 to 47. That's all it does. The actual district changes that are before you shuffle almost 1,500 people from one district to another and back and forth. That's 10% of the population of the town. All of that to satisfy one person or punish one person, depending on how you're looking at it. The fact of the matter is, the ripple effect and the changes in the rest of the state have nothing to do with this. We're not in the East Bay. We're talking about 2 districts. That's all we're talking about. And the problem for this body, I want you to consider this very carefully. I'm not saying anything that isn't already out there in the press. This is ripe for a legal challenge. It is very ripe for a legal challenge based on the legal precedent I cited earlier and based on the facts that have been developed in the record through the committee process. If this change that I'm suggesting isn't made, I can practically guarantee that someone, not me, because I don't think I technically would have standing, but maybe the former opponent or the Rhode State GOP will file a lawsuit and challenge this. And that's going to open up a whole can of worms. I don't think a lot of people want to go down that path. It's going to cost a lot of money, and I don't think that's something we want to do. This change is unnecessary. It shuffles people around. It breaks up neighborhoods. And by the way, for all of you who oppose voter ID, as you know, I was a big proponent of that, but the one argument for voter ID against it that I always thought had some resonance was this. People may show up to vote and find out that they don't have their identification, and they're going to get discouraged, go home, etc. I think there's some validity to that claim. I also think there's a lot of validity to the claim that people are going to show up at their old polling place when it's been changed for no reason. And in a place like Burrillville, your old polling place is going to be a 15-minute drive from your new one. So it's not like it's just down the street. And there's going to be some voter discouragement. So I would suggest everyone here who was opposed to voter ID for those reasons ought to support my change as well. Obviously, change is necessary. We all know that. But irrational change should not be countenanced, particularly by